Elon Musk's plan to balance the U.S. budget explained. Let's see.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant.
Oh, brilliant.
On Tuesday, President-elect Donald Trump announced the creation of a new Department of Government Efficiency to be headed up by Tesla CEO Elon Musk and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. In a post on Truth Social, Trump suggested the new department would partner with the White House Office of Budget and Management, or OMB, to trim down government spending, suggesting it could even become the Manhattan Project of our time. Wow. This was actually something Musk talked about a fair bit during the latter stages of the campaign, and his stated plans are ambitious. During a campaign rally in New York last month, he claimed he wanted to trim $2 trillion off the $7 trillion federal budget.
It's a good start. Got $5 trillion more to go, but it's a good start.
Which, if it happened, would push the US into its first
I gotta minimize this. I found the trick.
Budget surplus since 2001. Originally, it was unclear what sort of timeline Musk was imagining here, but Trump's announcement said that the department's work would be done no later than July the 4th, 2026.
Whoa. Wait a minute. Their entire work will conclude. They will work together to liberate our economy and make the U.S. government accountable to we the people. Their work will conclude no later than July 4th, 2026. A smaller government with more efficient and less bureaucracy will be the perfect gift for America's 250th birthday. God damn, I can't read. I'm confident they will succeed. I mean, look, if you're cutting the budget by, what is that, a quarter? What's 2 divided by 7? What percentage is that? 2 divided by 7. So, yeah, if you're cutting it by 28%, a quarter, that's a good start, man. It's a good start. I don't know how you can be upset about that.
Said that the department's work would be done no later than July the 4th, 2026, which means Musk has basically 18 months to do what he can. So in this video, we're going to have a look at Musk's Javier Milei-style plan to trim down the American state.
Yo, is it his? Is that what he said? Because that was good. Hold on.
And whether he can actually succeed.
That second part, that's the real question. Can he actually do it? Not sure.
So let's start by explaining why the US might need to trim down the federal government. When Musk talks about why he thinks the US needs a Department of Government Efficiency, he broadly gives 2 reasons. The first is that America is, in his words, going bankrupt.
Yes.
In other words, the federal government is spending a lot more money than it takes in, which means America's...
That's not his judgment or his assessment. That's true. That is exactly true. Yes. Like the money that we collect from taxes and things barely goes to cover, if it does at all, cover our interest. I mean, I'll pull it up later, but yeah, that's just accurate. That's not his assessment of things.
National debt is now reaching unsustainable levels.
Look at that. Federal surplus deficit, United States and USD billions. And look at this here. The COVID stuff just fucking tanked it, and we've never recovered.
In the 2024 fiscal year, which runs between October 2023 and September 2024, the US ran a deficit of $1.83 trillion. This equates to about 6.4% of GDP, which is an absolutely enormous number by peacetime standards.
Jesus.
For context, over the past 50 years, the US deficit has averaged about 3.8%.
See, it's been bad forever. Like, it's constantly been like that big black line at the top, that 0. So that'd be like if we were running exact. I want to know what happened here before 2000. So this would have been like the Bill Clinton era, like right around here. So Reagan would have came in the 80s here. Things got a little bit better. We did better than average. We went down a little bit. Clinton comes in 92. And from 92 to 2000, we have this like straight shot upward. Interesting.
And the only other time the US has run a deficit this large was in the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis and during the pandemic. Successive and rising deficits mean that the US national debt has risen to over 120% of GDP.
That's what I mean. It's not his assessment that this thing is going broke. I mean, we're fucking broke.
According to Federal Reserve data. These are pretty scary numbers by themselves, but things have been made quite a lot worse by the recent rise in interest rates. Not only does this mean that fresh borrowing is more expensive, but it also means that servicing pre-existing debt, i.e. paying interest payments on the tens of trillions of dollars of outstanding debt, accounts for an ever-growing fraction of government revenues. According to the IMF, debt servicing costs now account for over 15% of all US government spending.
That's fucking ridiculous, dude. I mean, it's not as bad as I thought it was, but it's like that's crazy, dude. That's crazy. Look, and that blue line underneath is all other of the G7 countries, their average. We're the worst. We're the worst.
Nearly triple the G7 average.
Yep.
This means the US is spending more on interest payments than on defense or Medicare.
God damn. This right here. You can take care of that number right there. That's almost $1 trillion. You can knock that out. You can knock these out. And even if we just kept defense and interest, like knocking out, yeah, people don't want to talk about it. Not allowed to say that. Can't get rid of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Can't get rid of that stuff. Nope. We got to have that. Got to have the freebies in there. But it's like, even if we take care of the national debt, bro, there's still a lot of money here. So where is he going to cut the $2 trillion? That's what I want to know. Like, look, 3.5, 4.5. So what's that? 8. So here's another 8. That's 1.6. We do that. We get rid of those 3. We're almost there to $2 trillion.
The worry here is that the US gets caught in a sort of debt servicing spiral, whereby the US has to borrow more and more money to service its debt. But this means more debt, so more debt servicing, which forces more borrowing ad infinitum. On top of all this, Trump's fiscal plans, which include massive tax cuts, will probably make things a lot worse.
Not true. Every time there's been multiple breakdowns of this, but basically every time we lower taxes, we actually see more revenue because more people you make money in other ways. So like if the economy is moving more quickly, you get more sales taxes and more things like that. And so reducing the personal liability taxes doesn't necessarily mean that we make less money. In fact, in most cases, we actually make more money.
The Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget explains that his stated policies would add another $8 trillion to the national debt.
And I don't know, I haven't seen this one exactly, but a lot of the breakdowns of these proposals that I've seen assume that the spending and everything stays where it is, which is why it's important. Like, people talk about reducing the debt and reducing taxes and reducing all of that kind of stuff, but they need to talk about cutting spending. Like, being more fiscally responsible, or lowering taxes means nothing without also cutting spending, because like you mentioned in this graph before, if you just lower taxes and you don't cut the spending, then we still have to pay for the thing. So the government ends up needing more money, then it borrows money, which creates the debt and which raises the interest to a site that we can't pay. And so then we have to borrow more money, and the cycle continues. So exactly what he was saying before, like, it doesn't mean anything without cuts. And a lot of these breakdowns of what a presidential fiscal plan would look like for whatever candidate, a lot of these assume that nothing changes with spending. And so I don't know if that one does this or not, but I don't trust any of these because so many of them do.
That his stated policies would add another $8 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years, pushing the deficit up to 10% of GDP. There's also the risk that the US gets caught in another vicious cycle, as sustained government spending stokes inflation, which discourages the Federal Reserve from cutting interest rates, which means more spending in the form of higher debt servicing.
And this is why it doesn't matter, because the more money that the government borrows, the more they have to take out in interest, the more they have to borrow, the more money I'm sorry, this is why it matters, because if the spending is to stay the same and the taxes go down, then the government has to get that money elsewhere. And the only other place for them to get it is to borrow it. And so if they're going to borrow it, that's going to create inflation, which devalues the currency, which is the most insidious form of tax, the inflation tax, the one that you don't see, but you feel every cent of.
Costs. Anyway, that's the first reason. Musk worries that, without significant cuts in government spending, the federal government is at risk of going bankrupt. But the second reason Musk often gives is his belief that excessive regulation and government bureaucracy stymies economic growth.
You keep saying that like it's not a true thing. Like, just go look. Every time you reduce regulations, business does better. Like it's not an assumption. This is how it works. The biggest burden on the American economy, is the American government. It's that simple.
Musk therefore believes that if he can successfully reduce government waste, he'll be able to bring America's debt to GDP ratio down by both decreasing the numerator and increasing the denominator. In other words, reducing borrowing and increasing GDP. In the same vein, Musk also believes that a lot of government spending is wasteful, spent employing people to do useless things, or even nothing, when they could otherwise be doing productive work in the private sector.
Yeah, just go look at Rand Paul's breakdown of all the things that we waste our money on. Justin Amash just did a similar thing, and I think recently there was an exchange on X with Justin Amash and I think it was either Vivek or Elon. I don't remember who it was, but they sent them all of the breakdowns and all the data that they had on all of the wasteful spending, not inefficient, but just complete waste. And so, yeah, that's definitely true too.
Although it's worth noting that while there's obviously going to be some wasteful spending in a $7 trillion budget, the US actually has a pretty small state by international standards. According to the most recent IMF data, for instance, government spending amounted to 37.5% of GDP in 2024.
What are you trying to... Okay, how much they spend out, expenditure. Okay. But still, that's crazy. It's crazy.
By far and away the lowest in the G7. So that's why Musk wants to cut down the American state. But can he actually do it?
Yes.
Well, cutting $2 trillion off the budget before mid-2026 would be immensely difficult and would almost definitely require cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and the defense budget.
Let's fucking go.
Cuts to these big government programs require congressional approval, and even though Republicans have majorities in both the House and Senate, this doesn't mean he'll be able to get these cuts through.
Yeah, exactly, because we still have the filibuster, and so what that means is that even if all the Republicans are on board with this, the Democrats could go out there and say, you're taking away Social Security and Medicaid, and this is terrible, and I'm going to stand up here and complain about it until you give up, and then they go for days and days and days. And yeah, that's definitely going to happen. House, they probably have some sort of filibuster too. But point is, you don't have a super majority proof, or you don't have a super majority. You don't have a filibuster proof way of getting this done. And that's the biggest thing right there, because Congress, at the end of the day, is supposed to control the purse strings, and the chance of them approving a 28% reduction in government spending is insanely low. And so I'm not hopeful, but maybe we get the recommendations from it, and 5-10 years from now, we actually start moving in that direction. But a lot of people got to lose their jobs in Congress for this to happen.
He's in
Republicans and Democrats alike.
Both the House and Senate. This doesn't mean he'll be able to get these cuts through. Last month, for instance, Republican Senator Rand Paul proposed a bill that would cut spending by 6% a year, every year, until the US budget is balanced. But it was voted down by a 56-39 majority.
Of fucking course it was.
Which included Republican hawks who didn't want to see defense spending cut. It was for this reason that Trump failed to cut spending on Affordable Care Act insurance subsidies in his first term, along with other agency cuts. Musk and Trump could instead target so-called discretionary spending, outlays that are not permanently enshrined in law but have to be voted on every year by Congress.
And there ain't no fucking way that they're going to cut that either, because a lot of that is pork barrel spending. It's a lot of stuff that goes back to their constituents, and it's things that they point to during their re-election campaigns to say, look at the money I extracted for the federal government for you. And that's why it's never going to go away.
Discretionary spending accounted for about $1.7 trillion in 2023.
You have to make that zero to hit your $2 trillion target.
But about half of that went on defense, and much of it is spent on paying federal salaries.
Definitely not happening.
Ultimately, cutting the federal budget by 30% in 18 months would be immensely painful, however Musk does it. And the only place anyone has tried anything remotely similar is Argentina, where President Javier Milei has cut the federal budget by 35% in just a year.
They can do it. Let's do it.
shutting down 13 government ministries and
Yes.
sacking about 10% of all civil servants.
Let's go.
But while Millet's plans have sort of worked, the government ran a monthly budget surplus for the first time earlier this year, they've also triggered a deep recession, with GDP shrinking by about 3% this year and the poverty rate now above 50%.
And this is the problem, is that, Peter Schiff talks about this a lot, but we've been living high on the hog for so long that austerity measures are warranted and necessary if we're going to get out of this. I mean, you have two choices. You could either stop taking the drugs and go through the withdrawal, or you can keep taking the drugs until they kill you. I mean, either way, you're going to have to go through some difficult times. The point is, the longer you wait, the less likely you are to survive it. And so, like, to this point, the profitability things or whatever here, these are all good. Once it here,
Surplus for the first time earlier this year.
that's all good. People are not going to like this, though. They're not going to like the next part of that.
And the poverty rate now above 50%.
They're not going to like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, you got to pay the piper at some point.
While this is something Musk has been remarkably candid about, admitting in a virtual town hall on X that his planned reductions would, quote, necessarily involve some temporary hardship,
Yes.
Trump might not be so keen on it, given he's the one who'll suffer the political repercussions.
Correct.
It's also worth saying that this is where the Argentina analogy collapses. Argentinian voters elected Milei knowing that they were asking for some short-term pain, whereas Trump campaigned promising an immediate economic boom with tax cuts and lower inflation. Now, as a TLDR viewer, it's clear that you have a thirst for learning.
Okay, we're not going to watch the sponsored thing here. But yeah, no, exactly. Like he said, Trump campaigned on making America great tomorrow, not make America great in 4 or 5 years from now after we've, taken the time to take our lashings and pay the debt. Like, it's not going to work the same. And he's not going to have a Congress that's going to want to do it because they're too self-interested in their own jobs and keeping their own positions of authority. So it's a big task. And, hopefully they make all the recommendations and things, and we can use those later on to say, like, this is what we should have done, see how much worse it's gotten. If we would have done this, it would have been better. And you can keep using that as something to run on and to run for and to have a plan in place to make things better eventually. But it's probably not going to happen in these next 4 years. I just don't have faith in that.